Discuss Alabama sports. Good morning, Rodney.
Good morning, Gary. How are you?
Doing well. Alabama finishes 13th in the final college football playoff rankings and will face Michigan in the Citrus Bowl on January 1st in Orlando. I said this earlier, and I said it yesterday on social media. Clearly, I don't think anybody on that committee believes there are 12 teams in college football better than Alabama. But I also said this, Alabama had an opportunity to take care of its business. It didn't. It lost 2 games in the SEC to the 2 best teams it played, and this is a result. And now, as Nick Saban often says, you have to move on, and Alabama needs to get ready to play this bowl game against a Michigan team that I think will be highly motivated to knock off a powerhouse from the SEC. I like the matchup in terms of the marquee value. Where do you think Alabama's heads will be, their collective heads as far as a football team in terms of preparation for this game?
Well, I think that's the question. I think that's the best question because we really don't know. We've seen them come into games when there wasn't things riding on the outcome that in terms of championships or whatever. We saw this go back to the Utah game after the 2008 season, then after the 2013 season. We saw it with the Oklahoma game in the Sugar Bowl. And now this is kind of a similar game, I would think, Gary. Obviously Alabama did not respond very well in those other 2 games that we mentioned, and it will be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see who plays in this game. It will be interesting to see how this Alabama team not only approaches the game, but like you said, what's the mindset once this game gets going? We should be able to tell pretty early. What that is.
Yeah, Rodney, we're in a new era of college football, too, and that we are in the sit-out-the-bowl game era for some of these players. Nick Saban, I read a clip with him from 3 years ago that I found that was very telling when Alabama was in the playoffs. So he's certainly not something that he's being a hypocrite on. He said then, the playoff is going to affect the bowls. It is, it's all about the playoff, and you're going to have, questions about guys sitting out. Now Alabama's faced with that. He said on the teleconference yesterday it's an individual decision. He doesn't know. I've said for the record, I hope most of these guys play. I think, as he said, it's an opportunity to add value to your draft status by playing well in the game. I think it's also an opportunity to show that, listen, you came to Alabama to finish out your career and finish out your season. And also, Rodney, I hate the term meaningless bowl game. I'm sick of it. If it's meaningless, then don't go play, all right? It isn't meaningless. It's a game. It's an opportunity for a lot of these guys for the final time to wear that Alabama uniform. So I don't like the term meaningless bowl game, and I hope most of these guys play. I know all the fans do too.
Yeah, I think everything you say is accurate. I mean, I would agree with it in a lot of ways. But I also understand, too, the way it is now.
Sure.
I also understand if a guy's a top pick and he feels like it's a risk for him to play, that's certainly his prerogative. And if he chooses not to play, not that I like that, but at the same time, I certainly have to you would certainly have to understand his position, the risk that he might take, and it could cost him a lot of money. So I see both sides of it. And, as far as meaningless bowl games, I agree with you. I don't think that's the way to phrase it. But I do think the importance of these things, the amount of importance we used to place on them, the interest that used to be there, it's just dwindled dramatically. And that's, like you said, due to the playoffs. And I do think that eventually the playoffs will expand, and this will be, what will happen with the bowls. I really don't know. I can't project that, but it is clear that the bowls are, losing interest every year, more and more interest.
Rodney, this season, such high expectations as is the case every year for Alabama football, and 10 wins at a lot of places, is celebrated as a great year. Here, though, this is a disappointing season. That's just the reality of it. There's no other way to put it. You're 10-2. You lost to your 2 big rivals in the SEC West. You're not even in a New Year's Six bowl game. And I'm just wondering, of course, the injuries were a huge part of it, but I'm just wondering how you have, processed this now 8 days removed from the Iron Bowl. You knew this was going to come eventually. Alabama wasn't going to make the playoff every year, but this season. I mean, what do you think of it now that it's basically over except for the bowl game?
Well, had you told me in August that Tua would be injured in the Tennessee game, would basically play, with that coming 20 days off surgery against LSU, and that he would be injured against Mississippi State, would miss the rest of the season, and that Dylan Moses would miss the entire season, and all the other injuries. If you'd have told me those two and the way these things have unfolded, the other injuries, I would have told you 10 and 2 probably sounds about right. I mean, so I'm not. I think a lot of it is on those injuries, Gary. Those were two really good teams that Alabama lost to. Obviously, LSU's a great team, and when you're not at full speed and you don't play well on top of that, report parts of those games. We saw the LSU game. The first half was pretty much a debacle.
Yeah.
I would say that it would have ended up about like I would have expected it. I'd known all these things in August.
The ranking, again, I'm not as worked up over it as some people are because I guess I kind of am in the old playoff or bust category. But what do you take away from I mean, it's about the 4 teams that get in, but it would still be better to be in a New Year's Six bowl than not. But to be 13th, I mean, that does kind of make the process a little bit of a sham, I think. I mean, there's nobody on that committee in their heart that believes there are 12 teams better than Alabama. So,
but I think it sounds like to me, and honestly, due to the circumstances of Alabama, I just didn't pay a ton of attention to what everyone was saying yesterday and how they were thinking. But it just seems to me that, we can look at the teams. I think it's clear. For example, Baylor's 11 and 2. Okay, Oklahoma gets a lot of credit for beating them twice. Okay, to me, Baylor's a solid team. I'm not going to take anything. That is not a good football team offensively at all, though. For example, I don't think they're better than Tennessee. And Tennessee finished, 7-5 in the regular season? But how much more credit does Oklahoma get for beating that team than Alabama does for beating Tennessee? So what I'm saying is we're looking at the records and all of these things, considering it strength of schedule, but it seems like there's less importance maybe on the eye test, if you want to put it that way. But if I was looking at it, if I was just drawing it up and trying to figure out the best teams, I would say, I wouldn't give Oklahoma a ton of credit for beating Baylor because I just don't think Baylor's that good of a football team. I don't think the Big 12 is a very good conference. At the same time, I do recognize that Oklahoma is a good team, and they do deserve to be, in my opinion, in this Final Four the way it's all unfolded. So, it's just interesting that kind of the way they, like you said, the rankings. Alabama ended up 13. No, I don't think Alabama's number 13. I think they're probably in the top 6 teams, 7 teams in the country for sure. Just my opinion, but that's based more on the eye test. That's not going on the way they use the strength of schedule, which they basically say Alabama beat nobody this year. Is that's the way it seems that the feeling is. Alabama had 2 games, as you noted, LSU and Auburn, and those are the 2 games that could have put them over the top, and they lost both of them. Otherwise, they didn't get a lot of respect for the teams they beat.
Moving forward for Alabama, I do think the bowl game's important. I think Michigan's going to be motivated to play in the game. For Jim Harbaugh, it's a big opportunity. We both have already said we don't know where Alabama's going to be in terms of preparation. We'll have to see how many guys are going to play in the game or how many guys may sit out. I know it is an opportunity in these bowl practices to work some young guys for next season, but Nick Saban mentioned yesterday in the teleconference the Bama factor, playing to the Bama standard. And I do think this is an opportunity. He said that quite often the last couple of years for this program and this team to show up and prepare and play a good game. And, it's not a great feeling right now, but Rodney, you and I both know Alabama fans. You go to that bowl game and lose, it's going to be a lot worse feeling about the future of this program. So I do think this is a big game in that regard.
Well, I think it's important. I think that you can use this too, as this preparation that you have is almost like a pre-spring practice a little bit, start moving towards next year and use this game to kind of, as a springboard towards next year, hopefully. We'll see, but there's just so many questions about this, Alabama program right now moving forward. And it starts with, Tua. Does he come back or does he go? All these other juniors, which ones stay, which ones leave? So many things that I don't think are going to be answered before this game. I do think the game is important. No question about that. And I hope Alabama has that right mindset that we talked about earlier. I don't think it necessarily will be an indication of where the program is heading into next year, though. Just my opinion.
Recruiting. With Alabama not playing in the SEC championship game, it was a big opportunity for recruiting this past weekend. There's some uncertainty now with some of the commitments at Georgia with Pittman leaving to go to Arkansas. And, we got a lot of coaching changes. So not only are there players that Alabama's recruiting that are uncommitted, there's some players at other schools probably they're committing. How important is it, and they've got a good class, but how important is it to finish strong here with the National Signing Day coming up late next week?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's very important. I think that the class that they have committed right now, they have to hold on to those guys, which there's still some battles going on. Tim Smith, defensive lineman, was here this weekend on an official visit, committed to Alabama. Gary, he may be, one top 3 or 4 interior defensive linemen in the country. He's out of Sebastian, Florida. And, the Gators are still pushing really hard for him. He's supposed to make an official visit there this weekend. Right now, the feeling has been strong that he will stick to his Alabama commitment. That's been kind of the indications that he's been giving. So that's a key. You want to hold on to him. You want to hold on to all the other guys that you have, obviously. And you want to close with a few guys. Philip Webb, who may be the best linebacker in the country in this class, maybe the best player in the country in this class, out of Buford, Georgia. He was here this weekend on an official visit. Most people think that he is, leaning towards LSU, or has been leaning towards LSU. He had a really good visit. I think his mother's going to play a big role in his decision. Ultimately, it'll be his decision, but I do think she'll play a significant role. And I think they had a really good visit. Now, will it be enough to overcome LSU? We'll see. So guys like that are certainly important. McKinley Jackson's a big defensive lineman out of Mississippi, a highly regarded player at Alabama, LSU. And now Ole Miss has been in the mix, but how much will the hiring of Lane Kiffin impact some of these guys like McKinley Jackson? So you never really know moving forward, but I think that Alabama needs to, finish off this class, get a tight end, a top-notch tight end, whether it's Darnell Washington, maybe Jeremiah Pegues out of Mississippi. So they've got some things that they have to tie up, and if they can do that, Gary, this class will push for, possibly number 1. I don't think it'll quite get there, but I expect it to be a top 3 type class.
Well, that's what you have to do to stay at the top. You've got to keep recruiting. Quick thought from you, Rodney. I want to ask you about the playoff. Of course, we've got LSU and Oklahoma 1 versus 4 at the Peach Bowl in Atlanta, 2 and 3, which is a heck of a matchup with Ohio State and Clemson out at the Fiesta Bowl in Arizona. Your takeaways from the playoff, what are you expecting?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. This is really interesting, Gary. I tell you why. Oklahoma has been a team that you think of quick strike offense when you think of Oklahoma. You think of all the passing that they've done. Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, big plays. They have really emerged the second half of the season as a throwback type team.
Right.
Lincoln Riley has done a fantastic job of building the offense around Jalen Hurts' strengths. They're not trying to force a square peg into a round hole. They're not trying to make him stand back there and become, this drop-back pocket passer. They've become a run-first offense. It's really been powerful running those inside zone plays, and with Jalen's ability to run and then setting up the passing game with that. So I think they've done a really good job of modifying their offense. This is a strong running team. Their defense has improved. And I say all that to say, if they can use that formula to keep the ball away from LSU, score points, wear on them a little bit, force some turnovers, maybe LSU doesn't get in sync, then I think Oklahoma could have a chance. Now, with that said, I really think that if LSU plays its game, that this game could get ugly quickly. But you never can predict. When you get in these playoff games, you got two teams that, certainly both very talented. You got to see how it plays out. So I see a formula that Oklahoma could pull off a really big upset, but I also see more likely that LSU could run away with this game. On the other side, excuse me?
Yeah, I was just going to say the other game, yeah.
Yeah, I think Ohio State and Clemson, that one's harder to call for me. Gary, I don't know. Clemson's a really good team. There's no question they're a great team. But they have not really been challenged or forced to play their best, I don't think, this year. I just don't know, in that game. They've always responded in the playoffs, so I would expect them to play really well. Ohio State, some people think they're the most complete team. I think this is a hard game to call. I could not. If you ask me today, maybe the week before the game, I'll have a better feel. But right now, this one seems like a toss-up to me.
Going to be fun, and going to be a nice few weeks to take a break from football. But Alabama, once they get done with these finals, they'll crank up bowl preparations, and we'll keep you up to date. Rodney will keep you up to date too, folks. TiderInsider.com, still just $48 a year, the best value for Alabama on the internet. And of course, you can follow him on Twitter at Tider Insider and catch him every Tuesday night with me on Tider Insider TV at 6:30 on WVUA 23. Thanks, Rodney.
All right, buddy. Take care.